Let's go now to Chantal Meloni, who's an international criminal law professor and a legal representative for Palestinian victims in Gaza. She joins us now from Milan. Good to have you with us on the News Hour, Chantal. Now, we know the growing civilian toll is really raising some urgent questions about which military actions are actually legal and which constitute war crimes. Do we have any answers to those questions? And is it clear that what both Hamas and Israel are doing are illegal in the eyes of international law?
Well, yes, absolutely. International law has some clear answers regarding what's going on in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, and with regard to the attacks that we are witnessing, in particular on highly densely populated Gaza Strip, where civilian buildings are torn down, bombed, and even schools, hospitals, and we have seen media outlets. These are prima facie war crimes because they disrespect the three fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, which is, first of all, the principle of distinction, which warrants any party to exactly distinguish between civilians and military targets. And even when there is a military necessity, meaning that maybe a military target can be hiding in a civilian residential building, for instance, there is another principle, which is the principle of proportionality, that is very important. That means that it's not possible to use whatever force just to completely destroy a building in order to, for instance, try to destroy weapons that allegedly were hiding on the basement of the building while civilians were there, because there are restraints that are put by international humanitarian law. And of course, also the launching of rockets, which are per se unable to precisely target anything, constitute indiscriminate attacks and could be considered in some situations as war crimes. So yes, definitely we are seeing both parties possibly being held criminally responsible for their actions.
You mentioned the principles of proportionality and the distinction between both civilians and military targets. We know overwhelmingly the victims of this latest conflict have been innocent civilians, namely Palestinian civilians, including dozens of Palestinian children. So on the face of it, it would appear then that Israel is guilty of war crimes, given that most of the victims are civilians, children as well, and that really it would seem out of proportion to the attacks that Hamas has been launching on Israel.
Yes, and unfortunately what we are again witnessing in these days is nothing new. It is a very clear pattern that Israel has used at least since 2008, or the so-called Operation Cast Lead, then to go to 2012, 2014, and now we see it again. It's a very intentional decision to use disproportionate force against the civilians, the Palestinian civilians of the Gaza Strip in particular, but not only in Gaza, of course. And if you think that according to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, the civilian population of Gaza, they are the occupied civilians that are exactly those who are entitled to protection. Israel, as the occupying power, should protect these civilians and not attack them. It makes it even more grave, more serious in terms of international criminal responsibilities. And again, as I say, it is a pattern, it is a clear decision. It can be traced to the very top of the, for sure, of the military commander, chain of commanders, but even to the political level. And we have clear statements that were given in the years, not only now, but also in the past, in 2014, that show that there is an intention to inflict disproportionate damage, disproportionate suffering, to show, to teach a lesson, to try to break definitely the resistance in Gaza in particular, but not only.
As you say, this war between Hamas and Israel has become all too routine. We saw the first war in 2009 and again in 2014, as you pointed out. In the wake of those conflicts, were there any attempts being made to hold either side accountable from an international law point of view? And is that even possible?
It would be possible, absolutely, but unfortunately, so far, we haven't seen any concrete action, although we are now speaking in a moment where there is a big news, which is that the International Criminal Court in March 2021 formally opened an investigation into the situation Palestine, Israel-Palestine. And this, while we talk, I think it's important to remember that everything that is going on exactly now in front of our eyes will be subject of an independent investigation of the ICC. Everyone is calling the ICC prosecutor, at the moment Fatou Bensouda, in 1 month will be the new prosecutor, Karim Khan, a British lawyer, to start now, while we talk, to collect and preserve the evidence of the alleged grave crimes that are committed. Palestinians have been knocking, so to say, on the door of the International Criminal Court since 2009, in the wake of the so-called Operation Cast Lead, which was already at the time clearly a disproportionate attack against the civilian population, and where also the UN, through a fact-finding mission, had strongly called the UN Security Council to refer the situation to the ICC and the ICC to open an investigation. So it took over 12 years. I make it short because it would be too long to explain what were the obstacles, but mainly they were political obstacles in terms of not being sure about the status of Palestine as a state or not a state at the international level. Finally, we have a decision. It is dated 2021 that says that for the sake of the jurisdiction of the ICC, Palestine is considered as a state, and the occupied Palestinian territory is under investigation by the ICC.
Okay, Professor Chantal Meloni, we will have to leave it there, but thank you so much for giving us your analysis on the NewsHour.